Edgar Wright is one of those filmmakers that you just know what kind of movie you're getting into when you sit down to watch one. And of course, in the past, he's done Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, Scott Pilgrim versus the World. What could be said about the guy? Like he's got a great sense of humor, a great sense of style in music. And his movies are always fun. So the premise for Baby Driver is this: it's a heist film with the getaway driver having a case of tinnitus from an accident when he was very young. So he's always got like some sort of ringing or humming going on, and he has learned to kind of drown this out by listening to music all the time, and so much so that he basically every little thing he does, whether it be driving or walking, he kind of builds that around the song or the music he's listening to. Like he carries around like several iPods, for a different occasion and stuff like that. And he also has a micro cassette recorder that he carries around just to record things that he hears, conversations that he has, and he uses that to build kind of like his own mixes, almost like a digital yearbook or something like that. So that's the premise, and honestly, I didn't know if I was going to be hip to it because all the action scenes and even a lot of other scenes are completely built and choreographed around songs, and I just wasn't sure if I'd buy it into that. But honestly, I'm not sure what I was so worried about. It's no less digestible than going to see a musical and having your lead characters break out into song and dance every now and again. And in fact, in a lot of ways, this is kind of like a musical. The characters aren't singing lyrics pertaining to the story, but rather, the music is punctuated by like the revving of an engine or slamming on the brakes or gunshots. That's kind of your lyrical flow as you listen to the music and you watch these scenes unfold. And it is so well done. It's so meticulously crafted. Each sequence in the film, really. I mean, there's really not an ounce of fat on this movie, and you get the impression that if you were to take a song out, it would completely change the tone and the intent and the choreography that's already been put into play here. Ansel Elgort plays the titular Baby Driver, and of course he made a name for himself in The Fault in Our Stars by giving that film some weight, and it wasn't a crappy film at all. But I know some people were a little iffy about his casting as far as this Edgar Wright movie goes, and he was even up for the role of Han Solo in that Han Solo movie that eventually went to Alden Ehrenreich. Although having watched Fault in Our Stars and now this, I honestly don't know what anyone was even worried about. In fact, he does wear like a sweater, kind of like this two-tone sweater that's reminiscent of Han's shirt and vest. And I wonder if that was kind of like a little nod to it. I'm not sure. But Ansel's fantastic in this. It's almost a bit of a thankless role because he doesn't have too much in the way of dialogue. It's not exactly like Ryan Gosling in Drive, although that there are a lot of parallels in the story between Drive and Baby Driver, although stylistically they couldn't be more different. Ansel really moves and kind of emotes through the music he's listening to, whether he's driving or he's with his girlfriend, or just dancing around the apartment with his roommate who is deaf. Speaking of girlfriend, Lily James plays the girl he meets in this film, and I've been watching her for some time from Downton Abbey when I first saw her, and then of course she did a wonderful job in Cinderella, and she's just as enchanting here. Baby meets her at a diner, and her name's Deborah, and he has his micro cassette recorder out, and Edgar Wright was really smart in making her fun and witty, and she immediately kind of grabs the micro cassette recorder and records herself singing something and offers it to him and says how much she likes driving and music. And it's great because as an audience member, your heart is kind of thumping along with Babies, like, oh my god, here's this gorgeous woman who's into all the things you are. And there are moments when Deborah looks at Baby and just, smiles or just gets lost in his eyes. And it's impossible not to fall in love with Lily James in this movie. Like, you buy the romance right off the bat. And there aren't necessarily a lot of romantic scenes in the film, but they're integral scenes. There's a sense of purpose there. Kevin Spacey plays kind of the head honcho who sets up all these little heists. You can tell how much fun he's having making this movie, and his character's a lot of fun. And now I'm not going to spoil anything as far as the third act goes, as far as the characters of the story, just so you know. But I really enjoyed how his character played out. And I've seen some people say that, some of his actions didn't ring true of his character, and I disagree. I think there's a lot of little hints throughout the film that kind of give you an idea of the character he is. And I really enjoyed him. Jon Hamm is in here. He has a really fun role. From what I read online, it's one of the few roles that Edgar Wright wrote, with him in mind, or at least that Jon Hamm was at the table read and, was carried all throughout production. He stayed with the cast, because sometimes the cast members would change as, production went on. It's great to see Jon Hamm, just be this kind of a cool character. He's, I guess you could say, one of the crew members who identifies a little bit more with Baby, and in some way he has a girl by his side always, and there's almost kind of like a weird little parallel between him and Baby as the film goes on. And I really dug how they carried that throughout all three acts of the film. Jamie Foxx plays this character Bats. They all have code names when they're working on these heists. Bats is his. And God, what a delicious role for Foxx. He is such a dangerous character. And he's got his moments of humor too, his Foxisms, if you will. But like, anytime he is in a scene, it feels like dynamite is about to go off. And regardless of which character he's with, you're almost fearful of what he's going to do next, because he is a bit of a loaded gun, and he could go off at any moment. And he's always fucking things up for the rest of the characters. And what a great role to see him in. It's one of those roles that kind of reminds you of why he's such a good actor, and how good he can really be when given something meaty to work on. Again, I'm not going to get into spoilers as far as where the story goes, but as you can imagine, Baby falling in love with Deborah, he wants to get out of the whole heist business, and of course, everyone else working on the heist is, he keeps getting pulled back in, and that's how the film plays out. Not that the film has like a huge twist at the end or anything; it doesn't, but it does have some surprising moments. And one thing I really loved about this movie is that there are consequences for every action that happens, and you get the sense that anything could happen at any moment. It doesn't necessarily feel like that the good guy is going to walk off into the sunset with the girl and everything's going to be okay at the end. And bad things happen, and there are consequences to each of those. And Guillermo del Toro, of course, director of like Pan's Labyrinth and Crimson Peak, he wrote a glowing review about the film and had some great things to say about it. One thing in particular that he said, it was something along the lines of, this is a movie in love with cinema. And what he meant by that, like, it's, sometimes movies can feel generic or by the numbers, so on and so forth. But this is one of those special movies where, every ounce of love was poured into every aspect, and you can feel it, even if you don't necessarily agree with some of the aspects of the film or how it necessarily plays out. I certainly have my gripes, definitely. As far as the ending goes, I think the kind of final push, if you will, was a little bit lacking considering everything that came before it. But it made sense from a story and character perspective, so that's fine. But it is he compared it, the choreography to something that Gene Kelly would have done back in his heyday, and he's 100% correct. As far as the chase scenes and the music, then the way it kind of weaves in and out of certain scenes from the film, action or no, everything feels like it has a purpose, and it's just so much fun to see it play out, to see all these characters kind of go at it. Edgar Wright builds up these characters, and it's you're really invested in them. Edgar Wright has made some amazing comedies, and I would never call his use of comedy a crutch, because no, it does serve the story and everything like that. But this is the kind of first movie where he feels almost like he's comfortable enough to step away from the comedy, because while this movie can be very funny, it's not a comedy. It's a very earnest film. It wears its heart out on its sleeve, and it just works so well too. It's again, to go back to that Del Toro review, he called it like a rock and roll fable, and there are those fantastic elements, but they take place in a somewhat real world. And going back to the consequences, even if they are not realistic, consequences, everyone gets them. And while it was a movie that I had an immense amount of fun watching, while it was going on in the theater, it was one of those films that after it ended and the credits had rolled, like, I just could not stop thinking about it, and how well crafted it was. As someone who first and foremost is a fan of cinema and loves discovering new films and having them elicit an emotion or a reaction from me, good or bad, I mean, this is a film that I can't wait for everyone else to see, to share that experience with, because it's one of those joyous occasions, when you go to the theater and you're hoping for that great cinema experience, and sometimes you get the okay experience, sometimes it's a shitty experience. But this is one of those occasions where it feels like it needs to be celebrated. And that's what Baby Driver is. It's a celebration of what's possible in the realm of cinema and editing. And it's a fantastic ride. And I hope you go out and see it. Enjoy it as much as I have.